call to order the TARPO meeting for February the 10th. Thank you to everyone for taking time to attend the meeting today. And if Matt will put up the ethics reminder, we'll get that taken care of and move forward. Do you need to do a roll call or you already done that?
I can read you off the list of who
Who's
that
here?
I can see.
Okay.
So Matt Day with Triangle J, Jack Meadows, Siler City, James Vose from Pittsburgh, Donald Andrews from Broadway, Kirk Smith from Lee County, Amy Fowler from Orange County, Teresa Thompson from Pittsburgh, Kathy Vollert from DOT Division 8, Curtis Brown from Siler City, Joel Strickland from Moore County, Lisa Mathis from the Board of Transportation, Deborah Ensminger from Moore County, Brandon Dawson from Chatham County, Morgan DeWitt from Pittsburgh, Matt Kitchen from DOT Division 8, Brian Kluchar from Division 8, Mike Dasher from Chatham County, Julie Bogle from the DOT Transportation Planning Division. And then there is one person who is just listed in the list as Missy's iPad. So I'm not sure who that is.
It's Frank Quist from
Okay.
Moore County.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right, ethics reminder. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every TARPO board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in a particular matter involved. I'll pause for anyone that this may impact. Alrighty, moving on to item number 2, purpose and agenda for today's meeting. Matt?
So we have one decision item on today's agenda, which is an amendment to our current year work program. But then we have a number of discussion and information items. 13A is a big one, so that'll probably be the bulk of our discussion.
Okay. Alrighty. Did anybody sign up for public comment that we're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right, are we ready? Is Alana ready for the presentation?
Well, that's what I was worried about because I don't see Elena on here. So we will go ahead and do my presentation first and see if Elena shows up.
Okay. So we're going to jump down to 4B?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I have for you today is a video, and this is part of our Title VI program. If you've been around for a few years, you might remember that we adopted oh, there's Elena. Hold on. Would you rather do hers first or mine first? We'll let Elena go first. So Elena, we're ready for your presentation whenever you're ready.
Oh, great.
If you
Sorry
would like,
for being a couple minutes late. I hope I didn't hold you up.
we were just getting to this item. So let me stop sharing and let you share.
Perfect. I'm just gonna.
And hopefully it'll let you share.
Fingers crossed, right? There's nothing like technology to prove us wrong. It says I cannot. I think
Okay,
if you, yep.
Try now.
Got it. All right. Can everyone see my slides? Thumbs
Yes.
up. Great. Well, I see a lot of familiar faces. So good afternoon, everyone. I guess it's officially afternoon. I'm very excited to be joining all of you to just give a quick update on the American Rescue Plan. For some of you, this may not fully be new information. Hopefully some of it is still new and useful. We at the COG have been working really hard and are trying to make sure that all of our communities are aware of what is in the American Rescue Plan bill related to what your community is receiving, the funding that you're receiving, the guidance that has been given out by Treasury, making sure you have an understanding of that, and then making sure that you are aware of what the COG can help with. So I'm just going to talk about those few items today, and I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any at the end. Oh, hold on, now my slides won't let me. There we go. So this is just a very high level overview of ARPA funding in case anyone has not been following. The American Rescue Plan legislation, which went into effect last spring, I believe, put $8 billion into North Carolina alone. So that's an extensive amount of money. And so it's really important both to our state and to our region that we make some important investments and some strategic investments with these funds that really help our long-term goals, both as a state and as a region. It was $5 billion specifically to the state of North Carolina, and then almost $700 million to the TJCOG region alone, which is our 7-county region. And so that's the amount that we're really going to be focusing on, because that's the part that TJCOG wants to make sure we can get out into our communities. Some quick overviews about the fund. So I know many of you work for county governments and municipalities. Over 50,000 received funds directly from U.S. Treasury. And so the funds and the guidelines that you will experience are a little bit different because you're a direct recipient from the federal government. And I know for some communities that is a brand new experience. And so there's lots of learning with that. For anyone that is in a community under 50,000, you received your funds and will receive additional funds from the Pandemic Recovery Office, which is simply a pass-through for the funds. The state of North Carolina cannot put any additional restrictions or guidelines on these funds. So although you are receiving funds from the Pandemic Recovery Office, they are not able to add anything, any requirements. And then these deadlines up on the screen, I'm sure everyone's seen them already, but you must make decisions, so obligating in terms of where you're going to spend the funds by December 31st, 2024, and they must be spent by December 31st, 2026. And a question that I have been getting pretty frequently is, will those deadlines maybe change? I don't foresee that being the case. So we are, I think one of the biggest priorities for TJCOG is to help our communities find ways to spend the funds strategically in the time frame that we've got. So I asked that question not long ago of someone from the federal government. I know there's a lot of concerns with rising costs and competition across local governments. And the answer was there's been added flexibility for the funds, and that from the federal government is seen kind of as you're welcome. So don't look for changes in the deadline, but we'll continue to keep an eye on that in case that does change. So these are the goals for the funds, which I think is important to know, just because it gives you some guidelines around how to use the funds, but these are also TJCOG's goals for the fund. So the final rule, which was recently released around the American Rescue Plan funding, has 3 core goals: to fight the pandemic and support families and businesses, to allow governments to maintain services amid revenue decline, and to provide your governments with tools for recovery. TJCOG's goals align with that, but they're a little bit different. We want to help you make strategic decisions. We want to help you find ways to leverage your ARP funds to get additional money where possible. We want to help you find ways to divert your money so that you can use it for areas that there is no funding available, and use other funding when possible. And we want to promote scaling up and collaboration where possible, especially in the face of rising costs and challenges with competition. So quickly, just wanted to discuss the final guidance that has come out from Treasury. It has made some changes in terms of what you can do with the funds, and I hope this is something that everyone has been seeing a little bit. In January, the final guidance was released, and it really outlined 2 paths forward for local governments. And so the first one is what they're calling the standard revenue loss formula. And to me, it makes most sense in my head as the way that they have a standard deduction for your taxes. So it's $10 million. Every local government is able to claim this, but the federal government's kind of assumption is that's the average amount of revenue loss in the country. And so every community can say, yes, we lost $10 million of revenue, and claim up to $10 million of their American Rescue Plan funds as revenue loss. The positive of this standard formula is that you can then use anything up to that $10 million for any traditional government services. So it provides an extensive amount of flexibility with funding that did not previously exist. And I will say, we are not in the place to provide legal guidance, but we strongly encourage every community to do this. So we strongly encourage most of our communities. This will actually free up all of your funding. The counties and a couple of our larger communities will have more than $10 million, and they'll have to make some decisions. But for most of our communities, this will really free up all of your funds to use for any traditionally provided government services. So that's an extensive amount of flexibility. The other path, which can be either instead of or in addition to, so for counties who may have received more than $10 million, you can claim revenue loss up to $10 million. And then for the additional funds, they've added eligibility. So there's still these 6 categories of eligible projects: public health, negative economic impacts, services to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, and that's expanded a bit to be related to general employment funding, general employment costs, infrastructure, which has been pretty broadly expanded, revenue replacement, and then administration items. So some notable additions to project eligibilities, and this will be notable for anything above that $10 million threshold. It adds eligibility for capital expenditures. So anything, I believe, that's eligible for CBDG, and now I want to confirm that, so I'm nervous to say it, but I believe that's the case, is eligible. It expands broadband and water infrastructure investments. So there was some concerns about eligibility for stormwater and projects like that. Those are now eligible. It provides easily understandable definitions for what it means to be disproportionately impacted. So there's some broader eligibilities for projects in areas that are considered to be, they were originally called QCTs. It stands for Qualified Census Tracts. But there was very vague definitions of how to define disproportionately impacted communities. And so there's more definitions in place now. It's really broadly expanded what you can cover in terms of government employment. And so that includes things like premium pay for a larger range of your employees, restoring the number of employees you had before the pandemic, and improving service delivery. So it's really expanded the ability of that. It has added abilities for federal and state match. The easiest answer to that is that any revenue loss funds can be used as a match for federal and state programs. So that's always an exciting thing to hear when we want to leverage for more funds. And then it expands eligibility of cybersecurity projects. And this is really a piece of that administrative, making sure that the government is able to provide services in the face of some cybersecurity concerns. Notable administrative impacts. So the big one is that unfortunately it did not relieve compliance regulations the way TJCOG was hoping that it would have. So you will still need to comply regardless of if you do the federal rule, regardless of if you choose revenue loss or not, you have to follow the same compliance regulations. So that includes uniform guidance and some of the federal procurement rules that are in place for any sort of federal funds. It's encouraged for them to be treated like grant funds. So I'm sure some of your staff, I think there's some staff on the phone, but if you're an elected official, I'm sure your staff is aware of this and making some policies and procedures for this, but it does need to be considered grant funds and kept separate from your actual funding so that you can track obligations and expenses and keep an eye on that for future reporting and auditing purposes. And then capital expenditures that are over $1 million and then over $10 million have additional restrictions in place in terms of how much you need to document. So it's just a matter of the bigger project, the more you have to show who, what you did to choose your contractors and your, and just keep more documentation. So there's a lot of great resources on this on the School of Government website. So I would encourage, if you're wanting to deep dive into administrative impacts of the rule, the School of Government has done a great job of breaking this down and even linking to sample policies, sample procedures, and so I will not go into that anymore. So just to kind of wrap up and just quickly discuss, obviously TJCOG would like to be helpful. And so we have been working for quite some time to help all of our local governments with American Rescue Plan, and we're going to be shifting a little bit in terms of what we are able to do, because we have received some additional funds from the legislature to help our local governments. So I'll quickly talk about what we have been doing, and then I'll shift a little bit to talk about what's coming. So we have been really trying to do things like this, which is keeping our local governments informed, making it a little bit easier for you to know what policy changes there are, what resources are available to you, best practices that maybe other communities have done that you can steal. We're all for stealing if someone's done it well, in terms of trading the funds. We host monthly meetings with at least one person that's locally designated from each community to talk about the American Rescue Funds and provide updates. And we also serve as the liaison for the COGS at the Pandemic Recovery Office Committee at the state level. So how is this going to change? So in the state budget, they appropriated $10 million to go to the COGS to assist with our ARPA implementation. There's 3 areas that this assistance will fall into for all of the COGS statewide. So this $10 million is going to go to 16 COGS. Each COG will get roughly $600,000 to assist our communities. That will include technical assistance, it will include recovery planning, and that will include regional exchange networks like this, but even more robust. And so this is TJCOG's long-term plan. And we want to make sure everyone's aware of it, because we are definitely still building out what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. First, we are staffing up. So we are going to be adding a significant number, 3, I think, full-time employees in total who will be working on American Rescue Plan for our local government. So they will be doing a range of services, which we're still kind of thinking through what exactly that will look like based on what we're hearing from our local governments, but it will likely include fund administration, reporting assistance, project management, and community engagement are probably the 4 big areas that we're hearing, at least right now. And it might end up being some more of these regional convening networks helping facilitate joint projects. There's lots of opportunities, but I think the immediate technical assistance needs will be those 4 that I originally mentioned. We're also going to be working pretty diligently to try and find ways to leverage as many different funding sources as possible. So I mentioned American Rescue Plan funds can be used as a match for a good number of funding sources. That's really important to us to make sure that those are used effectively. There's also a lot of other American Rescue Plan funds that are at the state and are going to be kind of rolling out in a variety of different grant programs. And so we're working hard to track those and try and, where we can, help our governments make the connection, help your communities make the connection between your American Rescue Plan projects and the other funding sources that might be available at the state. We're going to be continuing to have some resources and work sessions. So the best example I've got of that at this moment is our plan for next month. We're going to be doing a reporting work session. So if you're a county, your staff has already gone through the first time, they've already done their first report. So they submitted that January 30th. For all of our other communities, they have not submitted a report yet for their American Rescue Plan funds. And so we really want to share the lessons learned from the counties and large cities, and also help all of our other communities just get ready for that reporting. And then continuing to identify regional opportunities. So groups like yourselves who are, a collaborative group of subject matter experts in one area. We really want to hear from you if there's opportunities for projects that could be either done through American Rescue Plan funds at the local level, could be help jointly administered or be managed by staff at the COG that can assist with either project management or analysis of project opportunities. And then just letting us, keeping you informed of what's on the horizon. This is my pie in the sky slide. I don't like pie, so I use pizza pie in the sky. But these are just some questions for all of you. If you have any specific specific answers to any of these, you can answer right now or reach out to myself or Matt. We're just really making sure that we want to make sure we hear from you about opportunities that we might be missing in terms of how we can help. One of the big things that I actually don't know that I mentioned, we really want to make sure that in addition to this technical assistance piece, that we're also helping analyze potential opportunities for strategic projects. So, we're going to have a good number of staff who are available to think through strategy. And that's where this question of, are there areas of research or unknowns about pandemic recovery that need, analysis? Is there something that the COG should be looking into? And so I welcome any answers right now, but you're also welcome to follow up with me or Matt later on. And that is all I have. I'll keep this up just so everyone can see the questions, but then I'll.
Elena, thank you for the information. Appreciate what Triangle J is doing to help our communities work through all this ARP funds.
Absolutely.
Any questions? Okay. All right, Matt.
All right, so next is going to be a video that I've put together for our Title VI program. If you've been around for a few years, we actually adopted a Title VI plan back in 2019. And as part of that plan, it requires us to do a Title VI training refresher every 3 years. So this presentation is something I put together to kind of serve a dual purpose of being that refresher training and also just being something informational that we could put out on the website for the general public to understand Title VI. So it is 12 minutes and I apologize, it gets a little boring. It's a little down in the weeds, but this is something we have to do. So if you'll indulge, let's see. Okay. So hopefully you'll be able to hear the sound. Let me know if you can't. Welcome. This video provides an overview of the Title VI program of the Triangle Area Rural Planning Organization, or TARPO for short. Today, we will discuss a number of topics, including what is TARPO, what is Title VI, how does TARPO incorporate Title VI into its procedures, and how can a person file a complaint if they believe TARPO is violating Title VI. So, to begin with, what is TARPO? TARPO is a government agency that provides transportation planning services in Lee County and Moore County, North Carolina, and in rural portions of Chatham and Orange counties. The map on the screen shows our service area in blue. The parts of Orange and Chatham counties outside of our service area are covered by a metropolitan planning organization instead. TARPO is governed by a Rural Transportation Advisory Committee, or RTAC. This committee is made up of local elected officials from the member counties and municipalities, and a member from the State Board of Transportation. The RTAC is advised by a Rural Technical Coordinating Committee, or RTCC, made up of local, regional, and state staff representatives. Staffing for TARPO is provided by the Triangle J Council of Governments, a regional organization that provides various services in a larger 7-county region. TARPO receives 80% of its funding as federal funds that are passed through the North Carolina Department of Transportation. The remaining 20% comes from local dues that are paid by member counties. TARPO has 4 core duties that are defined by North Carolina state law: to assist in developing long-range transportation plans, to participate in the prioritization of transportation projects for funding, to serve as a conduit for sharing transportation-related information, and to provide a forum for public participation in transportation decision-making. TARPO's Title VI policy statement reads, "It is the policy of the Triangle Area Rural Planning Organization, as a federal aid recipient, to ensure that no person shall, on the ground of race, color, national origin, limited English proficiency, sex, age, or disability, and low income where applicable, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be otherwise subjected to discrimination under any of our programs and activities, as provided by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Executive Orders 12898 and 13166, the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987, and other pertinent non-discrimination authorities." If you feel you have been subjected to discrimination, you may file a complaint. Allegations of discrimination should be promptly reported to our Title VI coordinator, Matt Day. This policy is an expression of our commitment to non-discrimination and support of the Title VI program. TARPO developed its first organizational Title VI program plan in February of 2019. The plan describes the activities that TARPO staff will carry out to ensure the organization's compliance with our Title VI policy, and provides a snapshot of data about the region to aid in Title VI analyses. The document can be found on the TARPO website at the link on the screen, or by going to the main TARPO website, www.tarpo.org, clicking the Resources menu, and choosing General Documents. So you may be asking yourself, what is Title VI? Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits any programs or activities that receive federal funding from discriminating against people on the grounds of race, color, or national origin. Since TARPO is a subrecipient of federal funds that we receive through the North Carolina Department of Transportation, we are subject to Title VI requirements with oversight from NCDOT. Under Title VI, it does not matter if discrimination happens intentionally or unintentionally. If TARPO's actions or policies have a discriminatory effect, even if policy neutral, then the organization is potentially violating Title VI. Over the years, a number of laws and executive orders have amended the requirements of Title VI. Executive orders have designated the Justice Department and Attorney General as the lead agency on Title VI issues, and added requirements related to limited English proficiency populations. And the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987 clarified that Title VI applies to all parts of an agency, not just the parts receiving federal funds. In addition to Title VI, a number of additional laws extend non-discrimination protections to additional groups of people. The 1973 Federal Aid Highway Act and Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 extended protections on the basis of sex or gender. The Age Discrimination Act of 1975 extended protections on the basis of age. And Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 extended protections on the basis of disability. All of these protected classes are covered by TARPO's Title VI policy. Related to Title VI is the concept of environmental justice, or EJ for short. EJ analysis is intended to focus attention on the environmental and human health effects that federal actions have on minority and low-income populations. an executive order signed in 1994 requires all federal agencies to develop EJ strategies. Because TARPO receives federal funding, we are also governed by the following 3 EJ strategies that were defined by the U.S. Department of Transportation. To avoid, minimize, or mitigate disproportionately high and adverse human health and environmental effects, including interrelated social and economic effects on minority and low-income populations. To ensure the full and fair participation by all potentially affected communities in the transportation decision-making process, and to prevent the denial of, reduction in, or significant delay in the receipt of benefits by minority and low-income populations. TARPO's Title VI program plan lays out the following 5 steps for how we will achieve environmental justice through our plans and activities. We will identify and evaluate the environmental, public health, and interrelated social and economic effects of our programs and activities. Propose measures to avoid, minimize, and/or mitigate disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental impacts, and provide offsetting benefits and opportunities to enhance communities affected by our programs. Consider alternatives to proposed programs, policies, and activities where it would result in minimizing or avoiding disproportionately high and adverse impacts. Elicit public involvement, including soliciting input from affected populations, and include an EJ section in TARPO plans and studies. Another key aspect of Title VI relates to limited English proficiency, or LEP, populations. TARPO must provide service to all people, not only to those who speak English. Discrimination by language goes against Title VI's national origin protections. Over 11,000 people in the TARPO service area primarily speak Spanish. Because of this, TARPO must translate certain key written documents into Spanish. TARPO must also supply language interpreter services in any language when needed for oral communications. TARPO has a language assistance plan as part of its Title VI program plan that outlines the measures we will take to ensure reasonable and fair participation in our programs. As was discussed earlier, TARPO is staffed by employees of the Triangle J Council of Governments, or TJCOG. TJCOG provides services in a number of different focus areas, including transportation. There are currently 2 primary TJCOG staff assigned to work on TARPO. Matt Day is the primary staff person and also serves as TARPO's Title VI coordinator. Any questions or complaints regarding TARPO's Title VI program should be directed to him. As part of Title VI, TARPO maintains a number of maps and data sets on protected populations. These are based on census data and are used to identify areas most likely to have Title VI or EJ impacts. Any person who believes that TARPO has discriminated against them on the grounds of race, color, national origin, including language, sex, age, or disability can file a Title VI complaint against the organization. Complaints must be submitted in writing and must be filed within 180 days after the alleged act of discrimination. Complaints must be signed by the complainant or a representative and must include the complainant's name and contact information. A standard complaint form can be used if desired, which can be found on TARPO's website. Intimidation or retaliation against complainants is prohibited by law. Complaints against TARPO can be submitted to the TARPO Title VI coordinator or to the North Carolina Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights, the Federal Highway Administration North Carolina Division Office, the U.S. Department of Transportation, or the U.S. Department of Justice.
It's not
Once
good.
filed, the complaint will be acknowledged and investigated by the appropriate agency. If TARPO is unable to conduct the investigation itself, then it will be conducted by the North Carolina Department of Transportation. This concludes our brief overview of TARPO's Title VI program. If you have any questions, please contact Matt Day, TARPO's Title VI coordinator, at 919-558-9397, mday@tjcog.org, or the mailing address on the screen. Thank you for your interest in this important aspect of TARPO's transportation planning activities. All right. So that was the presentation. Are there any questions about that? All right.
All right. Guess we'll now move on to Board of Transportation update. Ms.
Can I
Mathis?
make one request?
Yes, sir.
So I did get a message from Stephen Robinson that he needs to leave in about 5 minutes. So if we could move his item, that is the Division 7 update, if we could do that now so that he can get out of here, that'd be helpful.
That will work. Stephen, you're up, and we'll ask Ms. Mathis to hold hers until you finish yours.
No problem.
Thank you so much for being accommodating. I apologize. I got about double and triple booked today. So thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you guys. Aside from the Division 7 updates, which is practically no changes from the previous time, I really don't have anything to add because Matt does such a good job keeping you apprised of the step in the process with that. But I'm here if there's any questions that I can help answer in regards to Division 7.
Does anyone have any questions for Stephen regarding the information in the packet or anything else on the Division 7 update?
Is that the Orange County portion?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, I had a question on page 5. The first one, it said is on hold, and I was just wondering if you know when that will restart. And
Are
then I
you
had a
referring? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And on page 6 of our agenda packet, there was a contract number 204674, and it was resurfacing 35 sections of secondary road. It says in Durham County. And so I'm trying to figure out why that's on Orange County active projects.
Well, I will answer the first question. I will find out about what the tentative date for the resuming the work on that project will be. I'll have to check with our project development team based off the funding. The second one is the reason why that is included on that one. There must be some road that overlaps into Orange County, which is predominantly in Durham County. But when we pull up our listing for Orange County, it also shows up in that just because it takes a very holistic view of that. So that is why it's included in the Orange County one. Same thing if you look at the top one, actually the top one is now gone. So, oh, no, that's right there. The first one, which is 202581, which is the improvements on SR 1838 and SR 2020 from 15501 to SR 1313 or 1113. That's in Durham County. But like I said, since it goes into Orange County just a little bit, that's why it's included on that. But in regard to your question on when the project work will begin back on the old NC10 project, I will find out from our project manager and I will respond back as soon as he has an idea or if he has anything to provide.
Okay, that's great on the page 5. On the page 6, I actually went to the state website and tried to look up the contract, and it was like a 95-page contract, and they mentioned maps, but the maps weren't actually there. So I'm trying to figure out how we're supposed to actually learn. And it mentioned multiple, it said 35 sections of secondary road. So it sounds like it's a bunch of different places, but how is a member of the public supposed to find out what this project actually is?
Yes, ma'am. The maps are more outlined in the project plan, the resurfacing plans that come with it, which are also available on the internet. But if desired, I can, as long as they're not too big to email, I can email you a copy of the plans which show the map routes and locations and the extents.
That would be great.
Okay.
All right,
Sounds
thank
great. Well, I will get you those 2 items. I'll try to do it in the next day or 2 if that's all right.
you. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other questions for Stephen? Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, we'll back up to Board of Transportation update and Ms. Mathis.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I'm bringing you 4 items from our February board meeting, which was last week. We'll start with the statewide transportation improvement program. As we've been talking about, due to rising material and labor costs impacting projects, the prioritization work group recommended that the Board of Transportation concurred in stopping prioritization 6.0. In collaboration with the work group, which includes our local, regional, and state partners, was utilized to help develop a 2024 to 2033 STIP. We expect the first draft of this document to be released later this year. Notable actions over the past couple of months. Number 1, the board approved a scenario method for selecting delivery projects for this STIP. The board gave consensus to proceed with the work group's recommendation that the oldest funded project should have priority in the selection process, and there will be a layer of flexibility in the process as well. Our focus throughout has been collaboration and transparency with our partners, and we will continue to do so. We are also looking into new ways to present this detailed information to make the next STIP document one that is easier for readers to consume. The second item I'd like to talk about is our DBE outreach. We want to make sure that everyone is aware of our January DBE meetings that were rescheduled due to weather, and they're going to be taking place this month instead. The odd number divisions had theirs on February 5th, and our even number divisions have rescheduled their meetings for February 19th. The meetings are critical in helping to make sure that small and disadvantaged businesses know how to make connections and do business with NCDOT. We encourage anyone who's interested to search DBE on our website and find a meeting to attend. My third item is about our winter storms. Our NCDOT crews and contractor resources prepared for and responded to several winter storms in January. COVID-19, labor shortages, and supply chain issues have impacted our department just like they have every other industry. Every county in North Carolina saw snow, ice, freezing rain, or some combination of those elements over the course of several different weather events. Our divisions and contract crews worked around the clock to restore safe access to our roadways, and they deserve a lot of credit and gratitude. We also want to thank our residents across the state for listening to our messaging in the media and that urged them to stay home unless they absolutely had to drive. When the pictures started to come in during the events from our traffic cameras, we mostly saw empty roads, which really made it a lot easier for us and our crews to get out and do their jobs more efficiently and safety. You may have noticed during these winter events that some of DOT's social media posts were more lighthearted. We hope that gaining some attention with the occasional comical and relatable post will help us keep people's attention when our more critical safety messages need to go out. And the last thing I want to talk about is our 2022 summit. For those of you who are unable to attend, the summit took place on January 19th and 20th at the Raleigh Convention Center. We had thought leaders from around the world come and present information about disruptive technologies and how North Carolina needs to plan now for the transportation system of tomorrow. This is how we will begin to shape the NCDOT of the future and to be ahead of change and not just responding to it. We're going to be planning for our next summit soon, so we look forward to sharing those details. But in the meantime, if you missed anything, we highly recommend that you go on and see some of the video recordings of some of the wonderful sessions. That concludes my report, and if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
Any questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Transportation Planning Division, Ms. Vogel.
Good afternoon. I do not have a newsletter ready today. It is still being developed. CTP updates I would normally go over. I'm going to wait, since it's an agenda item, wait for Matt to cover that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Division 8 updates. Mr. Klashar, Brian.
Good afternoon. Kathy and Matt are also with us from Division 8, and we are on page 33 with the orange banner. And just about all of our projects are in planning and design, right of way, or not started. But the first project in Moore County, that's constructing a culvert on NC 22 over Nicks Creek, should be starting soon. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Brian? Okay, thanks, sir. TARPO staff update, Matt.
All right, so I will be sending out a newsletter following the meeting, as I usually do, but I wanted to give y'all a couple of highlights of things that will be in the newsletter. So to let y'all know that registration has opened for the annual MPO conference. That is at the end of April in Wilmington. As was mentioned earlier, the videos from the NC Transportation Summit are available. I actually watched most of the summit from home because I was home with a kid sick with COVID. So it was great to have that as an option, and it's great that they've made those available for anybody who would like to see those. NCDOT just recently announced they are going to have complete streets training sessions coming up. They are later this month, and there's 5 of them to choose from, virtual training sessions for anybody who's interested in those. The USDOT just put out a toolkit on rural electric vehicle infrastructure. So if anybody's interested in that topic, there's a new sort of guidebook toolkit on that. If anybody's interested in submitting an application for an NCDOT MOBI award, these are awards for multimodal projects. I know Sanford won one a couple of years ago for the work done downtown. The applications for that are due today. And then there's also a number of other funding opportunities that are out there, things like Watch for Me NC, which is a bike ped safety program, Triangle Transportation Choices, which is a travel demand management program. The federal government has put out guidance for the RAISE grants for this year, which is what used to be called Tiger grants or Build grants. They just seem to change the name of it every couple of years. And then there's also some AARP funding for what they call their community challenge. So that is my update.
Okay. Any questions for Matt? We're ready. Thank you, sir. Ms. Thompson, RTCC adjournment and report to RTAC.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. I'll take a motion to adjourn the RTCC meeting.
I'll make that motion, Teresa. This is Jack.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second. Sorry, Tom Tenike, Orange.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom. All right, our meeting is adjourned, and we had one decision item, the same decision item as yours, and we recommended approval of Amendment 3 for the mid-year amendment to fiscal year 22 planning work program. We have the same 6 discussion items as on your agenda. There was really additional discussion on just the first 2 items. The first being the STIP development process. There was some additional conversation on the P7 timeline. And then on the second item, talking about the fiscal year 23 planning work program. A couple of projects that were mentioned was the Pittsburgh CTP update and the Pittsburgh Chatham Park South Village Small Area Plan process as well. There was some additional discussion on the Pittsburgh CTP timeline and the Chatham County CTP timeline and how those would possibly work together in the coming years. And when the new census numbers could be in and how that could affect Pittsburgh's possibly being included in Campo. There's also discussion on the possibility of if consultant groups could be a part of the CTP update process. And I think that's all the additional discussion we had. So that's our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty, December 9th meeting summary approval. It's part of the packet. Entertain a motion. If you'll please give your name so Matt can record it, and then the second.
Mr. Chair, Kirk Smith, Lee County, move to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Smith. Do I have a second?
Second by Lisa Mathis.
Second by Ms. Mathis. Okay, any discussion? Not Matt, roll call.
All right. Donald Andrews,
Yes.
Kirk Smith,
Yes.
Amy Fowler,
Yes.
Lisa Mathis,
Yes.
Frank Quiss,
Yes.
Mike Dasher,
Yes.
and Curtis Brown.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Okay. All right. Move to item 12, mid-year amendment to fiscal year 22 planning work program, amendment number 3. Matt.
Okay. So this is the time of year that I typically do sort of a major amendment to our annual work program. We usually look at what we've spent in the first half of the year and try to shift money around between the categories to make sure that we don't have ones that are falling too low or coming in too high. So that is what we've got here today. I've got a staff recommendation that we would reduce the prioritization line by 7,500. That would reduce it down to 5,000. And that is primarily due to the cancellation of P6, just meaning that we don't have as many tasks on that this year. Reducing the program and project development line by 2,000, which would get it in line with more or less looking at what we'd spent the first half of the year. This would get it in line to have relatively similar spending in the second half of the year. Reducing the travel direct costs line by $500, just because we're not driving a whole lot this year, not having a whole lot of in-person meetings. So we just haven't seen those costs. And then increasing the general transportation planning line by 3,500, primarily due to 2 activities. One being the spot work group that I'm a member of, that we had not expected to have this year, but did have because of the cancellation of P6. And then also administrative tasks related to the Second Avenue corridor study that we're doing. That was a study funded with some additional money that we got through NCDOT that we didn't know if we were going to receive yet at the time we did the original work program. So that was not included in the original work program. And then lastly, increasing the administrative activities line by 6,500, just looking at what was spent in the first half and seeing that we were definitely on track to go over budget on that line. So just providing some additional funding for that.
Okay. Questions related to staff recommendation on amendment 3? Okay, so need a motion to approve the fiscal year planning work program amendment 3.
So moved, Amy Fowler.
Commissioner Fowler. Second.
Second, Frank Quiss.
Commissioner Quiss. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Matt.
Donald Andrews,
Yes.
Kirk Smith,
Yes.
Amy Fowler,
Yes.
Lisa Mathis,
Yes.
Frank Quiss,
Yes.
Mike Dasher,
Yes.
Curtis Brown.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Let me know when you're ready for 13A.
All right. I'm ready. So 13A is probably the big discussion item for today. And I'll try to get through this quickly, but it's pretty dense. So just a reminder that NCDOT did announce last summer that they would be stopping the prioritization 6.0 process. That's the process we usually use to select projects for the new STIP. Since that process was stopped, the prioritization work group has been working on coming up with a methodology to develop the next STIP in the absence of going through P6. So we would typically go through P6. We needed to come up with a new process to develop the new STIP since we weren't going through P6. And just as a reminder for anybody who doesn't remember, the reason why that was halted was mainly because looking at the costs of projects that were in the existing STIP document and then looking at anticipated revenues, it was pretty quickly realized that the cost of the projects already in the STIP was higher than the anticipated revenues, and therefore there was no money to be adding new projects. And so what we in fact needed to do was to cut projects rather than add projects. So that's sort of where we're at. The prioritization work group has spent the last several months coming up with that recommended methodology. And as you heard earlier, the Board of Transportation has reviewed that and has agreed with those recommendations. So the next STIP document is going to be covering the years 2024 through 2033. For reference, the current one is covering 2020 through 2029. We do expect that there will be something that's sort of a new step that we're not used to, called a preliminary draft of the STIP that we will get sometime this spring, followed by the actual draft STIP later in the year, and then the final STIP adoption would happen in the summer of next year. Typically, when we go through a regular prioritization process, we just get that draft STIP. We don't get this preliminary version, but we'll get to the slide later that explains why we're doing that. And just as a heads up, this is not set in stone, but I think the expectation is that we will probably begin the next cycle, so P7. We will probably be looking at submitting projects for that for scoring, likely sometime around mid-2023 would be my guess. That we don't have a schedule for that yet, but just looking at what's happened in the past and sort of thinking about how things typically have worked in the past, that's my expectation of when we'll be talking about new projects. So the prioritization work group has basically made three main decisions. They made a decision about what the overall method should be for the STIP, which they ultimately decided not to try to go in and create anything new or crazy or different. It's going to be more or less a similar type of STIP that has always been done in the past in terms of the document itself. Now the formatting and things might be different, but the content will be more or less the same kind of structure as it's had in the past. The second decision was to do something called a delivery project set. That is a set of projects that are near-term projects that are far enough along in the process that we want to basically just go ahead and assume they need to carry over into the new STIP without being reevaluated. And then the third decision would be coming up with a method for how to evaluate which of the remaining projects from the old STIP get to remain in the new STIP. So, that first decision really kind of doesn't affect anything in terms of what we do. It's really getting to that second decision where we talk about the delivery project set. So for us, the first step is really that delivery project set. And this is the set of near-term projects that'll be automatically included in the next STIP. And so the set of projects has been defined as projects that are scheduled to let for construction in fiscal year 2026 or sooner, or have their right-of-way underway now or scheduled prior to 24, or projects that are attached to grant funding, because often there's, a STIP project might be used as like a match for another grant. And so you don't want to mess up those types of things. So anything that has those types of attachments, those also are in the delivery project set. The determination for which, what dates we're going by, the dates are going to be based on what is shown in the current STIP document. Now, a really important thing to understand here is that we're pretty confident that the project schedules on most projects are going to change in the new STIP. So just because your project made the delivery project list because it was scheduled in the current STIP for construction in 25 does not mean that it'll be still listed as construction in 25 in the new STIP. So just to be clear about that. So once you've kind of pulled out those near-term projects and said, these are the ones that are definitely in, then you need to evaluate how you're going to decide what of the remaining ones. So this is the method that's been come up with. It's called the P3, P4, P5 method. And the idea is that you want to favor the older projects and the projects with higher scores. So it'll start by taking all of the projects that became committed projects in P3, ranking them from highest to lowest score, and then going down the list until they run out of money. If they get through all the P3 projects and there's still money available, then they move on to P4, rank them highest to lowest, and go down the list, and so on. And so the idea is, you're sort of favoring the projects that have been in the pipeline for a longer time. And then within each of those time buckets, you're favoring the ones that had higher scores. So keep in mind that the way this works, there are 22 separate funding buckets. So there's a statewide bucket and then 7 regional buckets and 14 divisional buckets. And each of those is going to have a different amount of money available. So what you see on the screen here in terms of the numbers, these are the current estimates of what would be available for the funding buckets in our region after you pull out what's likely to be the delivery project set. So this is the amount of money that all those remaining projects are then competing for. We need to be very clear that there are going to be some, I can't guarantee, but I'm pretty certain there are going to be some projects that were previously considered committed projects that are not going to make the cut in the new STIP, that are going to be unfunded. So just be prepared that is likely to happen. And also one thing that has not yet been decided is how to define what is going to count as a committed project moving forward. So the work group has made a recommendation on that, but the Board of Transportation is still evaluating that item. So we don't know exactly how that's going to work yet. So to kind of summarize, what should be in the STIP is going to be, things that are pre-2024 because, the STIP is starting in 2024. So anything that's sort of current stuff now, anything that's in that delivery list, and then anything that qualified based on that recompetition using the P3, P4, P5. And what is out? Okay, good question. So there's a question in the chat asking, what does P3, P4, and P5 mean? So that is the cycle of prioritization. So the one that we were currently working on now was P6. So, P3, I believe, happened back in like 2013-ish timeframe, and then they happen every 2 years since then. And P3 is the oldest one that follows the STI process. Before that, it was a different process. So that's sort of our beginning of time in terms of STI. And then in terms of what's out, it's going to be the ones that didn't score well enough in the P3, P4, P5 method, and then anything that was previously in the STIP as a non-committed project. So you might remember I mentioned earlier that we would come back to something at why we have a preliminary draft STIP. Well, we have that because there's a provision put in there for flexibility. So DOT is planning to provide each of the MPOs and RPOs and division offices with a preliminary draft STIP that we can then go through and discuss amongst ourselves if there are any projects we would like to swap or request a schedule adjustment on. So for example, if in our area we have project A that makes it into the STIP and project B that doesn't make it into the STIP, we would have the opportunity to say, we'd like to remove project A and put project B in instead. Or if project A is in the early years of the STIP and project B is in the later years, and we think they should be swapped, we can discuss those types of changes as well. So the idea is that this is to allow us some local input into the process, address priorities that may have changed over time. You know, projects that were committed back in P3, they're pretty old projects. We haven't had to make any kind of decision at the RPO level on those projects in a long time. So the idea is that this is the opportunity to make changes if our priorities have changed. This is totally optional. The discussions would most likely take place this summer. And to be very clear, this is not an opportunity to add any new projects. This is only to talk about things that were in the previous STIP document. And there are some rules that have been put in place for how this works. So any swap that happens has to be agreed to by all of the MPOs, RPOs, and divisions that are affected by the project. So if it's, say, a project in Sanford, then that would have to be approved by TARPO and by Division 8. But if it's a project that's on the Chatham-Wake County line, then that would have to be approved by TARPO, CAMPO, Division 8, and Division 5. So for any project that we're swapping in, it cannot cost more than 10% higher than the project we're swapping out. So you can't take out a $50 million project and put in a $100 million project, but you could take out a 50 million and put in a 55 million. The swap should generally stay within their funding categories, so statewide, regional, or division. We can swap between modes. So if you wanted to, say, take out an aviation project and put in a highway project, we can do that. Although there are some thresholds that are required to be met at the higher level. And so, you know, DOT is required to put within the division and regional categories 90% of the funds towards highway and 4% towards non-highway, and then there's 6% that's flexible. So as long as they can continue to meet those required thresholds, then you can move things within between modes. And then we do have to document any justification for any swaps we want to make. So I know that was a lot of information to throw at you, but I'm trying to be respectful of time. So are there any questions?
Did you see the question from Commissioner Smith? Okay.
Yeah, so in the chat, Commissioner Smith says, with the increasing inflation, I suspect we will see some projects being canceled. And you know, I will say a lot of the reason for what we're going through here is the fact that the cost estimates on a lot of projects did increase significantly since the time they were originally entered. So you think about a project that was committed back in P3, you know, that cost estimate from back in 2012 or 2013, that's not a legitimate cost estimate anymore. And so DOT spent a lot of time over the last year or two kind of updating all the cost estimates on everything. And so that's really one of the reasons why we're kind of facing the situation we've got here now. And I will say DOT is assuming 3%, I believe, inflation rate for that's sort of their future assumption going forward.
Any other questions for Matt on the 2024-2033? So we'll probably Summertime?
So I'm expecting we should hopefully get that preliminary draft sometime within the next few months. And we'd probably be working over the summer to make any swaps. And we'd have to figure out what the process is going to be for that, because it's not something we've ever done before. So.
All right. You want to move on to 13B?
Yep. So every year around this time, I do ask for any feedback y'all might have in terms of items you'd like to see in our work program for the upcoming year. I am required to submit a draft work program to DOT by the end of the month, so I'll be working on that. And when I submit that to them, I also do post it on our website, and we have a public comment period on that draft. We then bring it back to y'all for approval in April. So really, anytime between now and April, if you have ideas about things you'd like to see included in there, you can send those to me, and we can make changes pretty much right up until April. So I did provide a link to our last year's work program. Teresa did mention earlier that during the RTCC meeting, there was a lot of discussion about related to Pittsboro CTP, Chatham County CTP, coordinating with Pittsboro on the sort of review of the small area plan for Chatham Park, which is related to the CTP efforts there. That was kind of the main stuff that came up during the RTCC discussion. But if any of you have any items that your community is planning to do next year that you think you'd like the RPO to be involved in. So for example, hey, my town is planning to do a bike plan update next year. Things like that, just let me know, and we can get those added to the work program.
Matt, this may not be related. This may be more directed to Julie. Where are we at with the Lee County one? I know.
That's the next item.
Okay.
I will also mention that we are not proposing to change the local dues, so that it would be the same as this year, which was $9,000 per county.
Okay. Any questions? Alrighty. Guess we're moving to 13C.
All right. So this is kind of intended to be mainly just an open discussion, but we've got a lot of studies underway right now that I don't know that everybody's aware of everything that's going on. So just wanted to provide sort of a status update on where these things are. So we're going to start with the Chatham County CTP. So this was actually adopted back in 2016, but at the time there was a lot of staff turnover at DOT and the report was never finished. And then in the process of working on doing the report, later on, they found there were some errors in the maps. And so there's just a lot going on. So it's taken a couple of years and a lot of work, but we're finally at the point where we're very close to having a final document, and we'll be planning to take that back out to Siler City for them to readopt the maps, because the corrections to the maps are all within their jurisdiction. So Siler City will have to readopt the maps. The county and Goldston do not have to readopt because there's no changes to the maps in their jurisdiction. But then TARPO will have to readopt, and the Board of Transportation will have to readopt. So once I get the go ahead that the report is ready and the maps are ready, I'll be getting in touch with Siler City folks to get the ball rolling on that. I think it's pretty close. Any questions on that one? Okay, so next on the list is Pittsboro. So the current Pittsboro CTP was adopted all the way back in 2011. And it is also only a highway CTP. It does not include any of the other modes of transportation. So it is definitely due for an update. And we requested an update at our February meeting last year, but due to staff time shortages at DOT, they haven't been able to assign any staff to it yet to do the full update. What we have been able to get is work on an amendment. So in the meantime, while we're waiting to start work on the full update for the CTP, we have requested that they do an amendment, which is to address a few specific locations. One is Eubanks Road, and I'm blanking on the other. The other is the Lorax Lane and Industrial Park Drive area. And those are areas where there's specific issues related to development proposals and questions about sort of how those match up with the CTP. And so we're making some amendments to those. There's some additional areas that we had considered doing as amendments, but it's sort of all tied in with the Chatham Park small area plan for their South Village, and it kind of needs, you know, an updated travel demand model to do analysis on. And so I think at this point the idea is that DOT is working on the sort of limited short-term amendment for us. They're going to get started on updating the travel demand model so that when they do finally have staff available to do the CTP, they'll be ready to hit the ground running. That's sort of where we're at now. And I don't know if Julie or Teresa have any additional thoughts on that.
I don't. Thank you, Matt.
I don't either.
So then moving on to Lee County. So we were trucking right along with Lee County prior to the pandemic, and then everything kind of slowed down. So where we're at is that we have the highway recommendations that we were discussing back before the pandemic. And then we had started work on the bike and ped recommendations, but we were waiting for the guidance from DOT because they kept changing their minds about what documentation was needed and all that. So we have finally gotten the guidance from DOT in terms of what analysis and documentation is needed for the bike and ped elements. And so I will be working on that as soon as I have time available to work on it. So I don't want to be the one holding up the train, but right now I'm the one holding up the train on that one. But the next steps are going to be sort of working through that bike ped stuff, getting cost estimates so that we can do the fiscal realism analysis, and then talking about public engagement and how we want to move forward with that. So I'm hopeful that that stuff can get ramped back up here fairly quickly now that we have the guidance on the bike ped. And now that I know Julie had also been pulled off to work on the DCHC MPO CTP work, which I believe is also cooling off now. So me and Julie just need to get together and figure out what needs to happen. So. Any questions or thoughts on that one?
Just Matt, this is Kirk. I just wanted to comment. You give us a bunch of acronyms there.
Yeah.
With Julie. Run that by us again, please.
That was the DCHC MPO CTP. So that's the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough Metropolitan Transportation Planning Aid Organization. They're working on their CTP.
Any other questions? All right, I guess Moore County model update.
Yes, so the Moore County CTP is not that old. It was adopted in like 2018, I believe. But the travel demand model that was used for that is getting a little old. It's from around 2012 or 2013. And so the folks down in Moore County had requested that DOT update their travel demand model. And so we had kind of been waiting for the updated census numbers in order to do that. Now that we have the census numbers, we are ready to move forward with that. And essentially, TARPO's responsibility in that is to do a community viz model, which is a land use model to work on the sort of population and employment growth forecast side of it. And then DOT's working on the roadway network and the actual travel model piece of it. But the goal is to be able to have all of that hopefully completed and ready to go, ready for use by the end of the year. That's sort of the target we're working towards now that we have the census data and we have my GIS guy here at Triangle J is got time available to work on it. So that's the goal. Any questions on where we're at with that one?
This is Frank Quist from Moore County. I'd just say we are very much looking forward to getting that update. We've had significant growth and some stresses on our existing roads and are trying to think about the future. So we're appreciative of all the work that's gone into it, but please keep it up. Thank you.
So the next one on the list is the Aberdeen Bike and Ped Plan, which is mainly being handled by the town and their consultant. But I am sort of involved in the committee and the meetings for that. I believe they are pretty close to done with that plan at this point. They actually have a public meeting tonight to talk about the recommendations. So I believe Brian said earlier this morning that they're expecting to have the report fairly soon on that. So hopefully wrapping soon. And then the last one here on the list is the Second Avenue Corridor Study. This is the study that we applied for additional funding from DOT in order to conduct this, and we did receive it for this fiscal year. So this is the first time that we're trying to do this where the RPO actually administers a project like this and hires a consultant. So it's a new experience for me. It's been a little bumpy, but we are finally at the point where we have selected a consultant. I just received the final draft of the contract this morning, so that'll be going off to DOT for their review here, hopefully this afternoon. And we're hopeful that we can actually get started on that within the next couple of weeks once DOT gives us the all clear on the contract. So we are required to get that done by June 30th, and the consultant is aware that it's going to be a sort of a quick burn project, but it is to look at the Second Avenue corridor in Siler City, where the CTP just recommends a road diet and really doesn't provide any detail about what that would be, what that would entail. And so this study is to help us get a better handle on what the preferred sort of cross section for that road would be. Are we talking about bike lanes? Are we talking about on-street parking, streetscaping, sidewalk improvement? There's lots of things you could do with a road diet. So what is it that we're actually proposing there?
Okay. Any questions about the Second Avenue corridor study? Alrighty. Second quarter finance update.
You have the finance memo in your packet, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but I do want to say that we've spent a little over $81,000 as of the mid-year point. If you look at the table on the second page, it'll say that we are at tracking at about 59% of our budget. That's true and it's not true. So It's true that we're tracking at 59% of our, if you just took the state funding and the local match of that state funding, but we actually had a fairly large balance of unspent local dues from previous years that rolled over to this year, that had been piling up for a few years. And so if you add that in, we're actually right about on track at 50%. So we had been aiming to spend down that unspent local fund balance. And so we are on track to do that.
Okay. Any questions on the finance update? Ethics filing requirement for RTAC members. Oh, fun time.
Yes. So this is just a reminder that all members and alternates on the RTAC are required to submit a statement of economic interest and a real estate disclosure with the state ethics office every year. Those are due by April 15th. I had not sent you the notice about this yet because there were some issues with the website last month. And so we were waiting for the website issues to get cleared up. I have been told that they are cleared up now. So I will be sending out the link either today or tomorrow, probably, to all of the folks who are affected by this. I do highly encourage you to do the online filing. It is much easier to track than doing a paper filing. So I will be sending up a follow-up email about this.
And they're due by the 15th of April.
Yes.
Any questions? Alrighty. STIP updates.
All right. So there were no STIP updates for our area from January. There are a handful from February. And just as a reminder, these are the amendments that were presented to the Board of Transportation in February. They actually do a 30-day review thing where they present them 1 month and then they're approved in the following month. So these won't be official until next month, but these were the ones announced this month. The Carthage Street bike ped project in Sanford and the Fields Drive sidewalk project in Sanford both delayed 1 year. And according to the document that is at the city's request, the NC 211 widening project from Aberdeen to Rayford was previously supposed to be using bond funding, and they have decided not to use bond funding for that. So it doesn't affect the schedule or anything. It just affects the money side of it. We have a new project on Corinth Road in Chatham County to add a safety improvements at the railroad crossing there. I'm going to get this wrong. What did they call it? Active warning devices. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that's what they'll be adding there. And then on the US 64 project in Siler City, they are delaying the right of way by 1 year, but they're not changing the construction year.
Any questions about the STIP updates?
Matt, when is that construction year for the Siler City project?
Let's see.
It's okay if you don't have it in front of you.
I think it's 26 through 29.
Yeah, starts in 26.
Okay, thank you.
Any
Now,
other questions? Go ahead.
Just to throw this out there, keep in mind that when we're looking that far out in the STIP, just remember we're going to be getting a new STIP that's going to have new schedules. So I wouldn't say that 26 date's set in stone.
Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions? All righty. I think that completes the agenda. Are there any updates from around the region that anyone wants to share? All righty. So our next meeting is scheduled for April the 14th. Yet to be determined whether we'll get to see each other in person or we'll still be remote.
We're going to follow the Triangle J board's lead. So if they go back in person, we'll go back in person.
Anything else? If not, we will stand adjourned. Thank you guys for taking time. I know it was a kind of long meeting, but a lot of information shared over the last hour and a half. Y'all have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Thanks all.
Thanks.